The man sits by the window, gazing toward the sea. The sea isn't visible yet. We're still far away near Wismar, but his gaze keeps moving forward as if he can already see it. His skin is dark brown, deeply scarred by wind and salt. His eyes are green, like the sea itself, sometimes dark green, like deep water, sometimes lighter, like shallow seas, depending on how the light falls across his old face. "Forgive me," I say, "but you're looking toward the sea, even though we're still far off. We're still near Wismar." He smiles quietly. "I see it everywhere. In my mind, in memory, in the waves. They're everywhere, you understand, not just in water, in life. You only need to know how to read them." "You're a fisherman?" "Was a fisherman, still am a fisherman, will always be a fisherman." He gestures to his hands, knotted, dark brown, old. The hands don't forget. The body doesn't forget. Once a fisherman, always a fisherman. The train pulls away, and we travel slowly northward, toward the Baltic, toward Stralsund, toward home. The man leans back and begins to speak without my asking, as if entrusting me with a secret. 60 years at sea. Started at 9 years old, a small boy with wet feet, back when my father took me for the first time. And I learned to see. Not just with the eyes, that's too simple, too superficial, but with the whole body. With skin that feels when the wind changes, when a new air mass arrives. With ears that hear how the waves breathe, how the sea below breathes. With a heart that knows instinctively when the storm is coming, before the signs are visible. He leans forward and his green eyes glow. People think the sea is random, chaotic, unpredictable, wild and dangerous and incomprehensible. But that's wrong. That's a misunderstanding. The sea is the most ordered, most lawful thing there is. It follows laws, gentle laws, organic laws, but laws, physics, mathematics, nature. And when you learn to read those laws, when you open yourself to them, then you lose your fear. You gain trust. The waves, for example. Many people see a wave and see chaos. But a wave isn't random. A wave is text. It tells you where the wind comes from, how long it's been blowing, how strong. A wave is like handwriting. Each one is unique. Each tells you something. He raises his hand and gestures toward an invisible ocean. Do you see this wave here? Short and choppy. That means weak wind from the side. But this long wave, it tells me a storm is coming from the west, perhaps hours away. And when I see this small wave riding over the big one, I know the wind is changing right now. I lean back, fascinated, as if the world is being explained to me. Over the years, I've read thousands of waves, never wrong when it mattered. My body knows. It comes from constant presence. You can't be inattentive at sea. You must be present, here and now. You must understand, or you die. But then, one day, just an ordinary day, I'm 65 years old, not so old, but not young anymore. The doctor tells me my heart is weak. The heart that's been reading the sea my whole life, that's been living my whole life, is weak. I can't work at sea anymore. The doctor says, no heavy lifting, no stress, no long days. and my whole life collapses like a house of cards. Because I don't know how to live if I'm not reading, if I'm not present in that intense, necessary way, if I can't take the risk of losing everything. His eyes become soft, vulnerable, open like the sea itself. And then something happened. I began to see waves everywhere, in conversations with people, in the way things unfold, in life itself. I realized the sea had taught me how to read the world. In my life, I've had many crises, but I've never experienced them as disasters because I saw them like waves. A crisis is like a great wave, but it doesn't come from nowhere. There are small signs. If you're attentive, you can prepare. You can move with the wave, not fight against it. He looks at me, and his eyes are deep green lakes, fathomless and gentle. My first wife left me. That was a great wave, a painful wave that pulled me underwater. But when I look back, when I read that wave, I see the small waves before it, the signs, the signals I didn't understand because I was too busy, too blind. And later, decades later, I'm married again to a good woman, and I've learned to read. I've learned to notice the signs, the subtle movements. Not everything that's foreseeable can be prevented. Life isn't that simple. But you can be present. You can understand. You can act with dignity, with compassion, with love. And the greatest wave, I read that one when my son died, an accident. One moment, one mistake, and he was gone. I was 75 years old, and it could have destroyed me, could have taken everything, could have held me underwater forever. But I had learned to read. I knew that pain is like an ocean. You can't fight it. You can't stop the wave. You can only swim. You can let the waves pass over you. Enjoy the wave if you can. Suffer if you must. And you survive. You drift back to the surface. Eventually, the light comes again. His voice becomes even quieter, barely carrying above the rolling of the train. That's the secret the sea taught me over more than 60 years. Not to control life. That's impossible. That's madness to try. But to understand life's laws, its rhythms, its tides, its natural forces, and then to dance with them, not against them, with presence, with wakefulness, with full gratitude for every moment, because you know every moment matters, that every wave teaches you. The train speeds up. The landscape changes, becomes flatter, wilder, the air tasting of salt. The man gazes still toward the horizon, where the sea waits. I'm 89 now. I may have 4 more years of life, maybe less, maybe more, who knows. But I'm not afraid, because I've learned to read waves. And death, it's the greatest wave. But it's also just a wave, a natural wave. It will come. I can see it small on the horizon still, but it's coming closer, slowly, unstoppably. And when it comes, I'll dance with it, the way I've danced with thousands of other waves. He gestures to his hands, these old, laboring hands. These hands have cast thousands of nets, each net a prayer. They've brought in thousands of fish. They've touched my wife tenderly, passionately. They've held my children, my grandchildren. They've worked. They've lived. And when the last wave comes, the great wave, these hands will know how to relax, how to move with the force of nature, how to let go and surrender to something greater. That's what's wonderful about age. You've had time to understand. You've seen many waves, many storms, many sunrises. And you know that after each wave, another comes. And that's okay. That's natural. That's beautiful. That's life. His eyes half close, relaxed, ready, peaceful. I'm traveling now to Stralsund, perhaps for the last time, for a final visit. I want to see the sea. I want to hear the waves, this old song that's accompanied my whole life. I want to lie on the sand and feel that it's still there, still alive, still breathing, still speaking. And then I'll go home to my wife, and I'll wait. I'll be present. And when the great wave comes, the last wave, I'll know how to swim with it. I'll get it right. Wismar glows on the horizon, the old harbour town, an old fishing village, a home. The man looks at it, and it's like a homecoming. Thank you for listening to me. Reading waves is a solitary art, a difficult art. Not many people understand. Not many people want to understand that life is like the sea, impermanent, powerful, beautiful. And we're only small boats, fragile boats, moving across it, trying to understand the laws. But if we learn to read, if we really read what the sea tells us, what life tells us, then we can go anywhere, with certainty, with joy, with peace. Your eyes grow heavy, and you can still see his green eyes that are like the sea. You still hear the sound of the waves, and you realize life is also a sound, a rhythm you can learn to understand. You relax your shoulders, your heart. You let the waves carry you gently to some safe shore, somewhere still and dark and warm. Stralsund is not far now. Lean back and close your eyes, because today I'm going to tell you about a woman whose breath shapes glass into Christmas baubles. The train runs from Sonneberg to Saalfeld, and outside it's dark and cold. But in a few minutes we'll be traveling through the valley where Lauscha sits, and there the story begins. On your seat sits a woman called Krista, and she's holding a small linen cushion on her lap. On it rests a single Christmas bauble. Nothing grand, nothing elaborate, no precious rarity. Just a ball of glass, thin and fragile, but wonderful, sparkling in the train's light, like a drop of water in the sun, like a tiny moon. Krista takes the bauble in her hand, and you see the delicate scratches on her palm, the marks that glass leaves behind when you work with it year after year, bauble after bauble. Thousands of them, each one shaped by the breath of this woman's lungs. She smiles at you and says, "This is the third generation. My grandfather started it all, with nothing, with just his hands and an idea. My mother carried it on, and now so do I. It's winter, and this is the season when we work hardest, when every workshop burns hot, when the air is thick with heat and steam. Everywhere in Lauscha, in every house, in every cottage, glassblowers sit in their studios crafting baubles, hundreds a day. You can hear them if you walk through the village, the roar of the flames, the whistle and singing of the furnaces, the delicate scraping and ringing of the glass. It's like a symphony, one that's only played in winter, only when it's cold and snowing outside. Krista tells you about her workshop in Lauscha. It's an old house with old windows, and inside it's hot as hell, but a hell full of light and color. The gas flames burn, precisely tuned, constant, and the temperature is so high you can't work without special clothing, without special eye protection. The breathing comes hard, your skin turns red. It takes strength and endurance. But Krista loves this heat, this intensity, this pure energy. She loves the smell of burnt gas, the force of the flame, that wild, untamable power, the way glass slowly softens under the heat, the way it moves from solid to liquid. She loves holding the glass rods in the flame, feeling the heat on her skin, watching the glass begin to glow, orange, then red, then nearly white from the intensity. The way it becomes soft and malleable, ready to be shaped by her breath. The blowing itself is an art, one you can't teach, only show, and then you have to practice hundreds of times. You take the heated glass at the end of the rod, hold it carefully, it's incredibly hot, and then you blow in very gently with just the right force, just the right speed. If you blow too weakly, the bauble becomes uneven, lopsided, not round. If you blow too hard, it can burst, explode suddenly, and everything's lost. There's a perfect moment, a precious instant, when the bauble is exactly the right size, perfectly round, perfectly symmetrical, perfectly beautiful. Krista can feel it without counting, without measuring, without any instruments. Her lungs and hands know how it should be, from decades of experience, from thousands of baubles she's blown. As the train moves through the snowy night, the wheels rhythmically ringing against the rails, Krista tells you about the different kinds of baubles she makes. There are the simple ones, silver, white, red, gold. Ones you can hang on any tree. Ones for every family. Ones you find everywhere. But there are also the special, precious ones, which Krista paints herself, hand-painted, each one an original. She has brushes as thin as hairs, made from animal bristles, carefully maintained. And with these brushes, she paints inside the baubles while the glass is still warm, still a bit soft, so the paint adheres better. The paint melts into the glass, fuses with the material, becomes part of it, and in the end, the baubles are full of delicate patterns, fine details, flowers with individual petals, leaves with visible veins, geometric forms, intricate and delicate. There are also the old patterns, made for perhaps 100 years, perhaps 2. Snowflakes that look like real snowflakes. Forests with trees and birds. Deer moving through woodland. Angels in long robes. There are also baubles with special surprises inside, with secrets. Little feathers that, when you turn the bauble, swirl around like real feathers. Fine tinsel in different colors, gold and silver. Even small pictures, old engravings or lithographs pasted on paper. When you hold the bauble up to the light, when you hold it to the sun, you see what's inside. And it's like a secret window into another world. Krista says these baubles are especially valuable, not just because of the work and materials, but because they tell a story, because they're a puzzle you can solve when you look at them. And in winter, when shops everywhere are full of decorations and families start to decorate their trees, when everywhere smells of pine needles and the whole country turns Christmas, Krista and her colleagues in Lauscha are pleased that their baubles will hang in homes, in living rooms all across Europe, in England and France, in America and Australia, and that small children will look at these baubles and wonder at their beauty. The glassblower then shows you a special piece she's just completed. It's a large bauble about the size of your fist, and it's green, the deep green of a forest of firs. Inside, Krista has painted with fine brushes a forest scene, with trees and a deer standing among them. Everything is so small and so delicate that you can barely see how she managed it. She smiles with quiet pride and says, "This one's for a customer in Munich, an old lady who orders a special bauble from me every year. This year she sent me photographs of her home forest, and I've tried to capture the forest as it looks in winter, to preserve it in this bauble." The train begins to slow, and you realize we're approaching Saalfeld soon. Krista carefully wraps the green bauble and lays it back on her cushion. She'll take it to her workshop in Lauscha and store it in a special box until it reaches her customer. Winter is brief for the glassblowers, and every bauble Krista makes is a promise that the tradition still lives, that there are still people who practice this old craft, that there are still places in the world where the heat of the flames fills the air and glass is transformed into the most beautiful shapes. The train slows as it approaches Saalfeld. Krista gazes out the window and tells you that next week she returns to her workshop in Lauscha. Already the next winter is approaching, and the furnaces are waiting, and there's so much work to do. She says she doesn't earn much from her work, that industrial baubles are much cheaper, that not many people understand why a hand-blown bauble should cost more than a machine-made one. But those who do understand, those people, the bauble means something to them. A collector in Munich buys a special bauble from Krista every year. A museum in Vienna has 30 of Krista's baubles in its collection. And sometimes Krista receives letters from people who say they've had the same bauble from Krista hanging in their tree for 30 years, year after year, and that they don't know how they'd celebrate Christmas without it. Imagine the glass glowing orange and red, the way it takes shape beneath her breath, the way it becomes a perfect sphere, catching light and reflecting it back like a tiny star field. Think of the Christmas bauble hanging in your tree. Think of the hands that shaped it, of the woman in the snow-covered town emptying her lungs to blow your bauble into being. The train rolled gently on, and outside, the world was now entirely dark. Just a few lights in the distance, scattered windows where other people too were settling into rest. I thought about how many people at this very moment were drifting off to sleep across the world, each in their own bed, their own compartment, their own room, and how we were all part of one great, quiet movement, a movement into sleep. The rhythm of the wheels on the rails, ta-dam, tadam, tadam, was like the breathing of some large, friendly creature carrying all of us together, through the darkness, through time. Sit still and listen, because I'm about to tell you about a woman who works wool until it becomes something entirely different. Warm house slippers, jackets that feel like love. The train runs from Bayreuth to Marktredwitz, and outside it's very cold, snow falling softly on the Fichtelgebirge mountains. In your compartment sits a woman named Gisela, and on her lap lies something that looks like snow. Soft, warm snow. It's fine-fulled wool, so soft, so pleasant to touch, that you immediately understand why people love such things, why they're willing to pay for them. When you place the wool in your hands, when you squeeze it, when you hold it against your cheek, you become warm at once, comforted. Gisela is a Feltmaker, one of the last in Fichtelgebirge, and she makes everything by hand, with water, with heat, with endless patience. She fulls wool to make felt, thick, warm felt, durable felt. And from this felt comes slippers, jackets, blankets, all the things that keep you warm in winter, that wrap around you like a devoted friend. She tells you, as the train climbs through the mountains, that felt making is one of humanity's oldest techniques. Older than weaving, older than most other crafts. There are records of felt made 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, even longer. The nomads of Mongolia made felt long before writing was invented, and the technique has remained essentially unchanged, could hardly be different. You take wool, raw, loose wool with all its natural oils, and lay it down in layers. You give it water and soap, and then you begin to full it with your hands, with your whole body. You tread on it. You rub it with strength and rhythm. You rinse it in hot water, and slowly, very slowly, with each movement, the fibers begin to bond. They tangle together, they hook and catch, and they become something entirely new, something miraculous. Felt. In her workshop in Fichtelgebirge, in an old house with thick stone walls, Gisela has large wooden vats filled with hot, soapy water. The vats are very old, inherited from her father, perhaps even her grandfather. She also has a modern machine that could automate the fulling, but she doesn't use it for everything, not for the things that matter most. For the fine work, for the pieces she truly loves, for the craft work that ought to have a soul, she does it by hand. She takes the wool, raw and undyed, the finest sheep's wool, sometimes from the village's own sheep, and places it in the large wooden vats of hot water. Then the fulling begins. It's exhausting, hard work, hot and wet, your body becomes drenched. But it's also meditative, rhythmic, hypnotic. Her hands turn red from the hot water. The skin becomes soft and wrinkled. But Gisela says this is when she truly comes to know the wool, when she communicates with it, when she dances with it. As she fulls, as she moves her hands, turning and folding the wool, she speaks to it. This might sound strange to someone unfamiliar with it, but it's absolutely real. She says, "Come on, you fibers, come on, bind together, become one, become a family." And the wool responds, tightening, growing denser, becoming firmer, condensing beneath her hands. The process can take hours, sometimes 2 days or more. You can't rush the fulling, can't hurry the wool. The wool has its own time, its own rhythm, its own pace. and Gisela respects that, respecting the wool like an old friend who needs time. She then shows you a pair of slippers she's just completed, finished just hours ago. They're not entirely done yet, not completely dry, still undergoing the final processing. They're made from a grayish-brown felt, with shades of cream and pale brown, soft as rabbit fur, soft as a rabbit's ear. Inside, they're lined with pure sheep's wool, cloud white and incredibly soft. The soles are made from a thicker, firmer felt with a touch of rubber to prevent slipping. Gisela says such a pair of slippers can last 50 years if properly cared for, if loved and maintained. Some of her customers wear slippers made by her grandmother, or made by her grandmother's mother before that. The shoes are still warm, still beautiful, still as soft as the day they were made. The felt maker also tells you about the colors she uses. She dyes the wool herself with natural dyes, ancient dyes, the ones her grandmother once used. Indigo for a deep, almost black blue that looks like the sky at dusk. Madder for red, a deep red like old bricks. Chamomile for yellow, a warm, soft yellow like honey. Cochineal for pink and violet. If you're fortunate, if the dyeing process goes well, colors emerge that are so deep and so vivid they seem to have a soul, as if they're not merely color, but emotion. She says chemical dyes may be faster, more consistent, but they don't have the same warmth, the same history, the same life. As the train slows and approaches Marktredwitz, Gisela tells you of a special project she's undertaking. A family in the village has asked her to full a jacket, not an ordinary jacket, but one made from the wool of their own sheep. The family raises sheep, and they've spun the wool and brought it to the felt maker. Gisela has promised to make something special from it, something that tells the family's story. She'll full the jacket so that you can see how each layer bonds with the next, how the fibers come together to form a whole, just as a family comes together. This is what drives Gisela in her work. It's not the money, though fine work does pay reasonably well, better than it once did. It's a deep love for the wool, for the work, for the tradition, for the history. It's the joy of making something people truly need, something that keeps them warm, that protects them, that embraces them. It's knowing that a child somewhere is walking through winter in warm felt slippers that Gisela made, slippers that hold her care as the child plays outside. There's also a touch of sadness, because Gisela knows this is a dying craft. Young people no longer want to felt, don't want to burn their hands in hot water, won't carry the heavy work of tradition. Yet Gisela continues, keeps working, keeps fulling wool, as if she alone could hold the entire tradition until someone comes along to carry it forward. As the train breaks approaching Marktredwitz, Gisela speaks once more of this special project. The family jacket, not simply sewn, but fulled, which is far more difficult. The family brought the wool from their own sheep, wool raised in their small village at the foot of Fichtelgebirge. The wool has been spun, and now Gisela has promised to create something truly special, something that tells their story. She'll fold the jacket so you can see how each layer bonds with the next, how the fibers come together to make a whole, just as a family comes together. Gisela says this is the most important project she's ever undertaken. more important than any sale, more important than money. Think of the wool woven into your pullover. Think of the hands that spun it. Think of the women working in the cold mountains, making warm things for you, while snowflakes cover the windows, while the world sleeps. And the landscape outside grew softer. The shapes of trees dissolved into shadow. The fields became dark expanses where the moon occasionally let slip its pale light. I felt my breathing slow, my heartbeat slow, my whole body sinking down into the warm embrace of the seat, into the warm embrace of this train carrying me without any effort on my part. It was a good feeling, a rare feeling, to be carried without strain, simply to trust that the wheels will continue rolling, that the rails will lead on, that morning will come eventually. The Hanover train leaves the station on a morning when the sky is grey as stone and it's raining. Not a gentle rain, a thick, steady rain that hammers against the window as though it wants in, as though it has a mission. I sit in my compartment, the small world that belongs to me, and I'm not alone. Another, a younger man, perhaps 50, perhaps older, has just sat down with a book in his hand, without hurrying. "Good morning," I say, just a courtesy, a gesture to the other. "Good morning," he answers. And that's all. No further words, no questions, no stories. He opens his book with calm, as though greeting a friend he hasn't seen in a long time. It has a dark binding, greenish, and I can't see the title. That's all right. That's even good. I lean back and the rain does its work. The train roof becomes the stage of the rain. Thousands of drops, perhaps millions, falling simultaneously, so it sounds like one continuous melody. Not music, but not noise either. Something in between. Simply the sound of water coming down, collecting, flowing away, washing the world. It's a sound that relaxes the brain, that says, you don't need to do anything. The rain does everything for you. The rain carries you. The man reads. He turns a page, very slowly, concentratively, carefully. The rain intensifies. The window is no longer really a window, just a grayness, a wetness, a membrane between us and the world that speaks of the world outside, but is as far away as the stars. We're in here. The rain is out there. That's clear. That's comforting. I hear his breathing. Not loud, but present. A person breathing, living beside me. A man reading. A train moving through a country where everything gets wet, where fields overflow, where water collects, where everything grows and decays at once. The windows are fogged by the difference between outside and inside. At some point, someone could run a finger over the glass, leave a line, a name, a heart, a mark. But neither of us does. Neither of us has the right to describe or mark this space. This silence belongs only to both of us, and we leave it alone. We travel over a bridge. I hear the change in the sound of the rain, higher, metallic for a moment, as though the water were drumming on steel. Then back to its normal voice. The man keeps reading. Another page. His finger marks the place where he'll start next. He reads slowly, savors it, The rain is an ally now. It's no longer striking at me. It strikes on the roof of this compartment, takes the pressure on itself. I'm safe. The man beside me is safe. The train is safe. And the rain can stay outside where it belongs, where it fills rivers, where it nourishes roots. It's strange, I think, how two strangers can share such a small space and not fall upon each other. We're two people who don't want to know who the other person is, and that's entirely acceptable. It's even beautiful, this kind of neighborliness that makes no demands, that simply exists. After an hour, or perhaps two, time is hard to measure in rain. It blurs like the windows. The man suddenly says, "The weather's wild today." "Yes," I answer. "Very wild. Very wet." He nods. "Good for reading," he says. And it's not a question, but a statement. "Yes," I say. "Very good. Just right." That's all we say. We don't need more. The rain has spoken for us, has said all the words that are needed. The breathing we both do is conversation enough. We're two people sitting together in quietness, and that's a form of closeness that's only possible in the rain, that can only emerge in these circumstances. Later, the windows are still grey, still fogged, still blurred. The man closes his book. He pauses, his hands around the book, as though showing it gratitude, as though saying, "That was beautiful." Then he lays it on his lap. His head drops to one side, relaxed. His neck gives way. He sleeps. The rain rains. The man sleeps. I sit here with this stranger, and the only sound is the train roof being bombarded by millions of drops. It's the gentlest bombardment there is. Violence that feels like love, because it only protects, doesn't destroy. My head grows heavy. The rain sings, and I sing with it, not with my voice, but with my body, which finally relaxes, which accepts the nearness of another person without questions, without expectations, without guilt. We're heading to Bremen. I remember that Bremen is our destination sometime. But now, in this moment, we're nowhere. We're only here, in this compartment, under this rain that keeps everything else outside. I close my eyes. The rain continues. The man doesn't read anymore. He sleeps. His book has fallen on his lap. And I'll sleep soon too, my body letting go, dropping all the tension from recent days. And that's enough. That's all you need. Another person nearby. The certainty that you're not alone. And the rain that locks everything else out. That makes the world small and warm. That holds us in its arms. The sun is just setting when the old man boards the train to Osnabrück and sits across from me. His hands are brown as earth, his nails darkened from decades of work. On his lap rests a small pot with green seedlings, which he holds close, as if they were precious memories. "Forgive me," I say. "Are you a gardener?" He laughs quietly and settles into his seat. The lines on his face deepen. "I was, for 50 years. Now I'm retired, but the work, you don't really give it up. You take it with you, wherever you go." I lean back, and the train begins to move with a rattle. Outside, the gardens of Münster fade into dusk. The old man regards his seedlings, and his expression grows tender, reflective. "You know," he begins, "I once thought that gardening meant creating something that stays. That you make something and then it's finished, yes? A beautiful bed, brilliant flowers, everything in its place. That perfection is eventually reached and then it holds. But that's not right. It's a lie we tell ourselves because we fear change." His hand moves slowly over the delicate leaves, as if examining a precious sculpture. I see how familiar his movements are with the life of plants. After many years, perhaps my 30th year of work, I learned that gardening means primarily one thing: always beginning again. Every spring new, yes, but also every day new. Every morning fresh. You go out into the garden. The sun has been different from yesterday. The plants have changed. The conditions have shifted. And you must adjust to them with an open mind. A plant that thrived splendidly last summer might need more shade this year because the surrounding trees have grown taller. Another spot has suddenly become too dry because I laid a new path there. Always stay curious. Always observe. Always begin without knowing how it will end. He sets down the pot and leans back. The lamp above us casts warm, yellowish light on his aged face, lined like a field after harvest. That taught me that life doesn't consist of completing something and then being finished, displaying it in a cabinet and feeling proud of it. That's an illusion, you see. A beautiful one, perhaps, but an illusion nonetheless. Real life, authentic life, isn't in the goal. It's in this constant beginning again. In the anticipation when you wake in the morning and wonder what will happen today. In the hope that drives you even when you're already 70 years old. In the curiosity about what might be different this time. What new paths nature will show you. I lean back and listen to the rhythm of the train, which draws me into another rhythm, an older one, a more primal one. I had a student once, perhaps 15 years ago. A young man, maybe 20, who wanted to do everything perfectly the first time. Perfection immediately or not at all. He was constantly frustrated because nature doesn't work like a machine, doesn't work the way his mind wanted it to. He was impatient. One day, we were both standing in the vegetable bed with earth on our knees, and I told him, "Beauty doesn't lie in completion. Beauty lies in being willing to try again tomorrow, in learning, in adapting, in being humble before life." The train rushes through the darkness, and the speed is like a pulse, like the beating of a great heart. And you know what the most beautiful thing was? His voice becomes quieter, almost a whisper. Over the years, it dawned on me that it wasn't really about the gardens, not about the individual beds or the flowers. It was about the gardening itself. It was about the process. It was about this constant presence, this constant attention. The gardens were only the tool for understanding life, for understanding the world. Every plant I grew taught me something. Every one that died taught me something important. There are no failures, only different lessons. Or, well, there are mistakes, but they're not the end. They're beginnings for the next chapter. He reaches for his pot and points to the tender green seedlings, which seem to glow almost luminous in the weak lamplight. Do you see these? These are tomatoes. I've planted millions of tomatoes in my life, perhaps 2 million. I used to count in my early years, but I stopped counting because the number became irrelevant. And every year again, when I plant the new tomato seedlings in the spring, it feels like the first time. The same excitement in my chest, the same hope that this time everything might be perfect, the same gratitude when the first green leaves unfold and catch the sun. I imagine this man standing in his gardens, decade after decade, kneeling in the soil, planting and weeding and harvesting. His hands must have held earth millions of times. And yet he says that each year feels like the first time. I carried that principle into my life, you see. This idea of always beginning again. It helped me with so much, not just gardening. My marriage was sometimes difficult. There were times when we didn't understand each other, when I thought it was over. Instead of saying, "Now it's finished, it doesn't work anymore, it's broken," I learned to think, "Okay, new day. We start again. We try differently, with more patience." The same with my children, with friendships that became difficult, with myself when I thought I was too old to change. His hand trembles slightly as he touches the pot again, and I see that this trembling isn't weakness, but sensitivity, a sign of someone who still feels, still lives, still remains open. And now, at 79 years old, I'm sitting here on this train, heading to Osnabrück to visit my grandson and plant a garden with him. A small one, perhaps 2 square meters, but full of possibility. He's 6 years old, and I'm as excited as I was when I started my first garden position at 19, nervous and full of hope. Because I know now that I can't just teach him how to sow seeds. I can teach him the process. That it's not about the goal, not about the harvest. It's about the beginning. Trust. Hope. The wonder when life unfolds, when the first green appears from the soil. The old man gazes out the window into the black night, and his profile is like something from an old film, timeless and wise. "Perhaps," he says very quietly, his voice barely carrying above the roll of the train. "That's the greatest wisdom life offers, not knowing how to do it right, because there is no right. But knowing how to be ready to always begin again from the start, with patience, with hope, with open hands, like a child placing a seed in the soil for the first time, not knowing whether it will grow, but hoping anyway, hoping with complete devotion." The train moves on through the night. I lean back into my seat and imagine gardens, endless gardens, every season new, always the first time, generation after generation beginning again. Your eyes grow heavy. You can still see the old man regarding his seedlings like a kind of silent prayer. And you think, tomorrow I'll begin again too. Tomorrow, with open hands, with hope. The lights of Osnabrück appear on the horizon. And so we travelled on, the train and I, and the few other travelers who sat with me in the compartment or in adjacent ones, each in their own small corner of the world, each on their own path into sleep. The warmth of the carriage, the soft crackling of the heating, the clicking of the wheels on the switches, all of this became a shared song. A song without words, a song that carries you and soothes you and says, "You may let go now. You may rest now. The train continues for you. Time moves forward for you. The world puts itself in order while you sleep." I board at Hamburg, and an older woman is already sitting by the window. She has grey streaked hair held back in a loose plait, and she's reading aloud from a book whose title I can't quite make out. Her voice is quiet, warm, as if she's telling someone something secret. Then I realize she's actually speaking to me. "Oh, I'm sorry. I read aloud. I still do it, even though I don't teach anymore. Old habits." She smiles apologetically. "Please, keep reading," I say. "I don't want to disturb you." She looks at me, and her eyes have a depth that only years of listening can leave behind. "You're not disturbing me, but perhaps you could help me understand something." The train pulls away. We glide out of the station. The streets of Hamburg disappear behind us. The woman folds her book and leans back. "I'm 69 years old," she begins, "and I taught for 40 years. German, literature, composition, German grammar, German classics, the soul of language. And you know what? For far too long, I was absolutely dreadful at the thing that mattered most." I look at her in surprise because she seems so calm, so wholly present in this moment, as if listening were her second nature. "Not at teaching itself," she clarifies, and a smile plays at her lips. "I could explain things well. My students used to tell me I could make complicated things simple. I knew how to convey grammar, how to take great stories apart to show the essential parts. But I was dreadful at listening. Really listening. Listening with the heart." She gazes out the window into the darkness, her eyes distant, lost in memory. Her hands rest quietly in her lap, folded as if in prayer. "In my early years, perhaps I was 25, I thought my job was to speak. I was the teacher, so I had to give the answers, explain the world, show the way, the one right way. The students were supposed to listen, understand, learn. That's how it worked, I thought. I speak, they listen. That's teaching. That's my job. I'm the authority. I'm the one who knows." But then this moment came. I must have been in my mid-30s, and there was a student, a girl named Emma. She was 14, very quiet, very withdrawn, almost invisible in the classroom. She sat in the back right, under the window. She wrote wonderful essays, deep, thoughtful, reflective. But she never said anything in class. She never raised her hand. She only answered when I called on her directly, and then barely above a whisper. And one day, after the lesson, she stayed behind and waited until everyone else had left. The woman closes her eyes, as if stepping back into that moment. She told me that my teaching was like a closed book to her, perhaps a beautifully bound book, wonderful to look at, but locked shut. She couldn't get inside because I answered all the questions myself before she had a chance to think. before she could think for herself. She told me I was far too in love with the sound of my own voice. The woman opens her eyes again. That hurt. It really hurt. I was injured. A bit angry, actually, if I'm honest. But then, after the wound had healed somewhat, after many days had passed, I came across a book by an educator, a man who said that listening is an art, a genuine art that must be learned, like painting or music or any other art, and that most people have never learned this art at all, because no one ever showed them how. She turns toward me, her eyes calm and worn, and deep brown like peat water. And I began to practice, consciously, intentionally, like a piano student who has to start over. I came into the classroom and didn't speak. That was hard for me, incredibly hard. I asked the question and then waited, really waited. Not just sitting quietly while it raced through my mind, but with my full attention, with my whole being. And suddenly, something happened. The students began to speak. Not just sentences, not just words, but real thoughts, original thoughts, surprising thoughts. And not just the usual suspects who always raised their hands, but the quiet ones too, the ones I'd overlooked. Emma. But here's the interesting part, the important part. The more I listened, the more I realized I wasn't just listening to the students. I was listening to myself too. I realized where I was wrong, how much I didn't know, couldn't understand, how many different ways there are to understand something, to see something. Listening didn't just change my teaching, it changed me. It transformed me. She reaches for her book and opens it again, regarding it with affection. This book here, I read aloud to myself again and again, because the writer says something I've understood in my head for years, something that's lodged there, but that I still haven't fully lived, haven't fully embodied. And I listen to him, still, after 40 years of teaching, at 69 years old, I'm still not finished learning to listen. I never will be. I know that now. And that's fine. It's more than fine. It's life itself. I lean back, and the rolling of the train becomes a rhythm, a kind of gentle, ancient pulse, the rhythm of breath and heartbeat. The wonderful thing is, she continues, her voice growing softer, that when you learn to listen, you also learn to see, really see. It's the same skill. You must put aside your prejudices like old clothes. You must open like a flower. You must be willing to be surprised, to be challenged, to be changed. And then it happens. Everywhere. A student says something that sounds stupid or naive or wrong, and you truly listen, and you realize it's brilliant, only expressed differently, from another angle. A child weeps, and instead of comforting it with words, my words, I listen to the child. I'm present with the child. And suddenly the child comforts itself because it's been heard, because it knows someone is there. She regards her hands as if reading answers in them. I wish I'd learned this sooner. 40 years of teaching could have looked different, richer, deeper. But I'm grateful, so grateful, that I learned it at all, that I didn't die at 40 and miss the second half of my life. And now, in retirement, I see that the most valuable thing, the deepest thing I can give another person, is not my words. My words are cheap. It's my attention. It's that I'm really there, with an open heart, that I listen. The landscape slides past. Flat fields, small villages, dark trees. Everything in motion. But the woman sits still, centered, present like a quiet lake. My grandchildren say I'm a good grandmother. They don't say it often, but when they do, I know they mean it. You know why? Not because I bake the best biscuits or tell the most beautiful stories. It's because I listen to them. Really listen. I'm there. And it wasn't always this way. I only understood it much later. Far too late for some people in my life who couldn't wait for me to learn. She looks at me, and I see a hint of sadness in her dark eyes, but also a deeper peace, a peace that has grown through pain. The teacher in me tells you this because I still hope others can learn faster than I did. Listening is not passive. That's a great misunderstanding. Listening is the most active thing in the world. It's the action that makes all other actions possible, that gives them meaning and depth. Because if you don't listen, if you don't really understand what the other person needs, what they feel, what they're saying, what their heart is saying, then you're only speaking to yourself. Then you're alone. There's no real contact. She opens her book again and searches for her place. Learning to live also means learning to listen. It transformed me. For 40 years I taught, but the most valuable thing I ever learned was to hear my students. The train rushes on. I think of all the people I haven't properly listened to because I was too busy speaking, explaining, judging. Your eyelids grow heavy. You can still hear the woman reading quietly, her voice like water flowing over stones. You notice that all this time, she's been listening to you too, even as she speaks. She's waiting for your thoughts, your silence, your presence. And that is the real gift. Lübeck appears in the distance. The man sits by the window and draws. His hands are thin, bony, but sure, precise. He doesn't make a single pencil stroke without intention. I recognize it immediately. These are trees. Not merely trees, but wonderfully considered trees. The crown and trunk in perfect proportion. The branches like an opening hand. Those are beautiful drawings, I say. He looks up, surprised, as if seeing me for the first time, though we've been sitting next to each other for half an hour. Thank you. I haven't drawn in a long time. He gestures at his hands. But I can't stop. Are you an artist? I ask. An architect. Was an architect. He sets his pen down and regards his drawing with a kind of tenderness. For 50 years, 5 decades, skyscrapers, shopping centers, housing complexes, entire districts. I was good at it, very good. I was proud. But he shrugs, and the gesture is full of resignation and simultaneously lightness. The train leaves Dresden, and we move slowly into nature. Green hills, dense forests, the magnificent Elbe Valley. The man points to the trees outside, which his eyes keep seeking. Do you see that? I missed that my entire life. I came to this Elbe Valley for the first time 2 years ago. Retired, all my work behind me, all my buildings constructed, all my dreams either realized or discarded. And I just sat there for hours, looking at the trees, really looking at them for the first time. Not as background, not as building material, but as genuine objects of study. And it dawned on me that in my whole life, in 50 years, I'd never drawn a single real form. I'd never understood real structure. I invented shapes, calculated shapes, but never understood them. He points to the drawing in his pad with great care. This is an oak. Do you see the branches here? That's not arbitrary. It's no accident, even if it looks that way. It's a system, a perfect living system. Each branch serves a purpose. The branches distribute themselves so that each leaf receives light, so the load is evenly distributed, so the whole tree doesn't simply snap in the wind, doesn't fall to the ground, but instead sways, flows, remains flexible, remains alive. His voice grows quieter, more thoughtful, more vulnerable. I designed skyscrapers, buildings of 10, 15, 20 stories. I was very proud of my buildings. They stood there, strong, compact. They were functional, efficient. Every square meter calculated, material waste minimized. But they had no soul. They were soulless. And now, when I look at a tree, when I draw these lines, I see that life needs something completely different from what I built. Life needs room to breathe, to grow, to be surprised. He sets down his pen and looks at me. His eyes are bright, blue-gray like the sky before a storm, full of feeling. Do you know the story of the architect who built houses but never lived in them? No? Well, that was me. That is me. I designed spaces for people without understanding what people really need. I optimized efficiency, calculated floor plans like a machine operator, reduced material costs, shortened construction times. But I never actually lived in my buildings. I attended the opening ceremonies, I paid the bills, but I never moved in and lived. And somewhere along the way, I realized that the people living in them weren't really living either. They existed, they functioned, but they didn't live. He points again to the trees outside, passing endlessly by, green and wild. A tree, on the other hand, it lives. The tree is not efficient. The tree is not planned. It grows chaotically, haphazardly, in all directions, and yet it functions perfectly. But this disorder, this apparent chaos, that is life. That is real beauty. That is how nature builds, not with straight lines and right angles and floor plans, but with curves and spirals and error tolerance and this wonderfully organic logic that I never learned from books. I started to understand that architecture doesn't mean erecting great buildings, monuments to your own glory. Real architecture means shaping a place so that people can live in it, not just physically, with roofs over their heads, but emotionally, spiritually, with room for dreams. And the trees, they understand that intuitively. The trees build themselves. The tree doesn't know how it should grow, but it grows right. It finds its way. He opens his sketchbook and shows me several pages, carefully rendered. Each is filled completely with trees, drawn with a kind of reverence. Different species, different sizes, different times and seasons. Firs with their symmetrical geometric forms. Birches with their delicate, fine branches like lace. Old oaks with their knotted, difficult, beautiful structures. I draw them every day now. I take the train instead of going to an office, and I draw. I sit in the park, and I draw. I go to Meissen to see the old town, but really I go to see the trees. And not from artistic ambition, you understand. That doesn't interest me anymore. I don't care about art critics or exhibitions. I draw because I want to understand. Because I want to catch up. Because I learned the wrong things for 50 years, and now, at the end, I want at least to understand something. We cross a bridge, and below the Elbe flows, green and deep and mysterious. The man watches the trees along the banks, reflected in the water. But the most beautiful thing is that it's not too late. I'm 76 years old, and I'm still learning. And it's not bitter, as one might expect. Not unhappy. It's wonderful. It's like coming alive again. It's like seeing for the first time, with new eyes, as if being reborn. He begins a new drawing with a sure hand. The lines emerge quickly, but not quickly from haste, quickly from confidence, from knowledge that runs deeper than the mind, full of life, full of respect. I may never plant trees again. Probably won't. My hands are too old, my body too weak. But I can draw them. I can teach others to see them. I can show them that there are other ways to build, to shape, to live. And perhaps if I were young enough, I would build differently. I would design houses that are like trees, organic, alive, with room for growth, for the unexpected. Not everything planned and cemented, but some things left to nature, some things open to life. That's the greatest lesson I've learned, far too late, but learned nonetheless. That life isn't in plans, life isn't in calculations, life is in flexibility, in willingness to be surprised, to be challenged, to be rewritten, in humility before something older and wiser than we are, something older than our architecture, older than our self-centeredness. He shows me the current drawing, a larch tree, wind-battered, bent to one side but not broken. It's beautiful in its wildness, in its imperfection, in its survival. This tree here, it grows high up in the Alps, in the wind, in harsh climate. It will never grow straight. It will never be perfect, not by my old standards. But it's so beautiful it hurts to look at. It hurts because it's true. And it lives. That's the only thing that matters in the end. Meissen appears on the horizon, the old town with its towers. The man folds his sketchbook and leans back. His hands rest on his lap. Quiet, content, finally content. "Thank you for listening to me," he says quietly. "It's rare that anyone listens when I talk about trees." People think it's mad that an old architect, someone of some standing, would suddenly start drawing only trees instead of talking about his great projects. It's not mad, I say. It's just arrived late. He smiles, and his whole face transforms. Yes, very late. Too late for much. But better late than never. That's an old man's dream. You can still see his hands, drawing curves, branches, life. You see the trees outside and realize they too are architects, only from a different school. And you think, it's all right to learn late. It's even beautiful. The train begins to slow. An old woman sits across from me and sews. She sews on the train as if it's the most natural thing in the world. A garment I can't quite make out. Silk or fine linen in a warm burgundy red. Her needle glides through the fabric like water. That's lovely, I say, that you sew while you travel. She looks up and smiles, and her smile is warmth itself. Her eyes are dark brown, deep, warm as honey. I sew everywhere. I've been a seamstress for as long as I can remember. 60 years actively, 6 days a week, sometimes 7. Early morning until late evening. She pauses and regards her work with great care. Or rather, I was a seamstress for 60 years. Now I'm officially retired, but I can't be unfaithful to the needle. The needle is an old friend. The train pulls out of Cologne, and I see the city slowly disappearing behind us. The woman continues her work. The rhythm of her movements is hypnotic, soothing, like an old song. Stitch, stitch, stitch. A meditation with thread and fabric, two materials becoming one. You know, many people think sewing is just craft, just technical skill. That you take a pattern, cut the fabric, and stitch it together. Done. Simple, mechanical, repetitive. They think you can switch your mind off. She shakes her head. But that's not what it's about. Or it's so much, much more than that. It's a whole world. She pauses for a moment and holds the garment toward me carefully, as if showing me something sacred. Now I see it's a dress. A dress in warm burgundy red, beautifully crafted, every seam perfect, not a thread too many, nothing unnecessary. But that's not what's remarkable. What's remarkable is the time sewn into this dress. The love, the attention, the kindness, the patience. 60 years of sewing means 60 years of spending time with people. Not the time they could give me, my time, my life, or, well, our time together. Time we shared. She sets the needle again with great confidence. Every piece of clothing I made was a conversation with the woman who would wear it, with the fabric, with its quirks, its fibers, its character, with myself, with my mind, my body, my heart. In the early years, perhaps I was 25, I thought time was valuable because of efficiency. The faster I sewed, the more money I earned, the more clothes I could make, the more successful I was. That was the logic, and I was fast. My hands were fast, but my heart was fast too. I was rushed. I was always rushed. She laughs quietly, not bitterly, but with a kind of tenderness. But then, at some point, perhaps when I was 40 or 50, I realized that was wrong. Time isn't valuable because of efficiency. Time is valuable because of quality, because of depth, because of what you put into it. I lean back and follow the rhythm of her needle, this old, slow rhythm. There was this wedding, perhaps 30 years ago. A bride, Maria, came to me 2 weeks before her wedding. She was nervous, tense. Her hands trembled as she entered my studio. And the dress another tailor had made didn't fit properly. The straps were wrong, the bodice was too tight, the whole proportion was wrong. And she wept. She sat on my chair and wept because she thought there wouldn't be time to make it right. She thought her wedding would be ruined. The woman gestures to her hands, to the light wrinkles, the scars, the spots. But I managed it. I worked for 10 days, every moment, every hour, even at night. And I didn't just make the dress. I lived with the woman too. I took her into my home. We ate together, talked together, while I sewed. About her life, her dreams, her fear, her love for this man. We became friends in those 10 days. And the dress that resulted, that wasn't just a dress. It was all those conversations, those thoughts, those tears, the love. Everything was in it, in the threads, in the seams, in the way it caught the light. She married in that dress, and she radiated. Not just physical beauty, but from within, because she knew she'd been heard, that every hour I'd put in, not just as craft, but also emotionally, also spiritually, all of it was in the seams. She could feel it. She continues sewing, but more slowly now, more consciously, with complete presence. And then I understood that sewing isn't really about fashion. That's a fairy tale. It's about time. It's a meditation. It's a way of living in the present moment entirely. When you sew, you can't think, not in the usual sense. You can only be. You must feel the fabric, its texture, its temperament. Feel the needle, its weight, its rhythm. Hold the tension, the precision. It forces you to be completely present. And that's become rare in our world, this total presence. I look out the window and see the landscape rushing past. Villages, fields, people living as we travel. The woman sews on. I've had a lot of time in my life. Years, decades, 60 years. That's a long time. But now, retired, with time to exist without pressure, I realize the most precious time isn't the time you have, but the time you use consciously. The time you put into something that's genuinely important to you or to others. That speaks to your mind, your heart. And the years of sewing, they weren't wasted. That wasn't my job. That was my life. That was how I used my life, my only precious time. She completes a stitch with great care and cuts the thread with an old silver scissor. You know, I've made many dresses, hundreds probably, maybe 2,000-3,000, and I don't remember them all, not the details. My memory isn't sharp anymore, but I remember the time I spent. I remember the hands I held while taking measurements, the moist hands, the nervous hands, the hands of brides, of women who wanted to be elegant for the first time. I remember the tears, the laughter, the happiness, the hopes, the dreams that came into my studio while I sewed. She pauses and looks at me, and her eyes are dark brown and wise. That's the secret that time has taught me over all these decades. It's not about how much time you have. It's not about living long. It's about being present while you use time. That you treat every moment, every stitch, every instant as if it were the last. With love, with full attention, with deep respect for time itself, which is the most precious thing we have. And now, I'm 77 years old, and I still sew. Not for money, that doesn't interest me anymore, but for love. I sew dresses for my granddaughter, a wonderful girl. I sew small things for friends. I sew from joy. And every seam, every stitch, I see my whole life in it. All the years, all the moments, all the people who mattered to me, who made me who I am. They're all in these stitches, in this work, in this meditation. She shows me her hands. The fingers are slightly curved, not from arthritis, but from habit, from decades of work. White scars from needles. The skin is thin, spotted, dark brown from the sun. These are not young hands. These are not beautiful hands in the conventional sense, but they are the hands of a woman who has lived, who has worked, who has loved, who has given. That's what I want to tell you before I go. Time isn't precious because of its length. Time isn't precious because there's a lot of it. Time is precious because of the love you weave into it. The conscious attention, the presence, the devotion. That's all that remains. That's the only thing that really matters. The train begins to slow. Aachen appears on the horizon. The woman folds her garment and places it in her bag. She gazes out the window and her eyes are gentle, fulfilled. Thank you for listening to me. It's rare that anyone listens when I talk about sewing. Everyone's too fast. Everyone wants to drive fast, arrive quickly. But the journey, that's life. And if you're present during the journey, if you travel with love, then every moment counts. You can still see her hands guiding the needle, making stitches. You realize that every stitch is a choice, a moment of presence. And you think, perhaps I should live that way too, with each moment as if it were a stitch in my life. Valuable, intentional, full of love. The lights of Aachen shine at the window. There she sits across from you by the window, a lady in a dark grey coat, her white hair pinned into a neat bun. You settled in just before Flensburg, and straight away you notice she barely takes any notice of you. Her attention belongs entirely to the knitting needles, dancing in her hands like the wings of a bird. You're tired from the journey, truly tired, body and soul both. And the rhythm of her movements is like a lullaby, a cradle song drawing you down into sleep. The needles click softly, metallically, with that gentle hush as the wool slides through. It's a sound you know from somewhere deep in memory, from childhood somehow. Your grandmother knitting, endlessly knitting, while you sat beside her and watched her hands move, telling her stories, safe in that old, familiar presence. Now, here you are on a train again, and you find yourself drifting back into that quietness, that warmth, that old, trusted peace. The wool she's working is a pale blue, nearly white in the patches where the window light catches it, where the sun shines through. You wonder who it's for. A grandchild, perhaps, a granddaughter, or perhaps just something she makes for herself, to keep her hands busy, to stop her mind from running, to fill the hours with purpose. Knitting is a kind of prayer, you think, a quiet devotion made manifest in wool. Repetition, pattern, hope with every row. There's a philosophy in it, almost a theology. Nothing forced, everything patient, everything follows the pattern. She glances up briefly as the train slows for a halt, brakes gentle for a moment. Her eyes a pale blue, much the same color as the wool in her lap. It's no accident, you think, that her eyes match the shade of her work. For just a moment, your gazes meet directly, and you nod slightly. Not theatrical, not out of politeness or social habit, but from something like understanding, a kind of mutual recognition. She nods back, barely perceptibly, a small nod that only you understand, and then her eyes return to the work, back to the focus, back to the needles. The landscape flows past like an old film, bare fields in grey tones, a few thatched cottages with dark roofs, trees naked and skeletal against the sky. It isn't snowing, but it could start any moment. The sky over Schleswig-Holstein is thin and cold, almost grey-white, and you can almost sense the first snowflake falling, see everything turning white. You watch intently as her fingers move, the motion almost hypnotic, as she picks up a new row without counting, without thinking, completely automatic. That's experience. That's a lifetime spent with needles and wool, decade upon decade of rows, millions of stitches. You rest your head against the window and realize you're hardly awake anymore. The cool pain against your forehead is pleasant. The train sways with its rhythm, and the needles click and click. It's a concert for one passenger, a concert just for you. You think there's never been better music in all your life than this gentle hiss of wool, this soft metallic murmur of the needles, this symphony of the everyday. The woman breathes steadily. You don't know her name, probably never will, but it doesn't matter. She's a presence, a voice without words, a pulse you can follow. In this moment, in this half-sleep, you understand something. Sometimes people are all that other people need, simply to be there, simply to breathe, simply to sit and do something that means something. After a while, she looks up again, this time for longer. She sees your head resting against the window, sees you half dozing. She doesn't smile, but something in her face grows gentle, opens like a door into a warm room. She knows this. She's seen it countless times before. People who are weary, who want to sleep, but can't quite let themselves fall. She keeps working, and somehow her needles seem to rock you, as though her task on this journey is to lull you down, to cradle you with every stitch, every row she completes. The rows multiply steadily. The piece grows larger, slowly, very slowly, centimeter by centimeter, stitch by stitch. You wonder how long she's been at it. Days? Weeks? Months, perhaps, if it's a large piece. It looks like it's nowhere near finished, like she'll keep on investing time in it. Endless time, threading patience into every single stitch, like little prayers. Each stitch is a moment, a small act of doing. Each row is a little eternity, a complete journey from left to right, or right to left. There's no impatience here. This is pure being, pure existence without haste, without pressure, without any goal except the knitting itself. You think about your own life, how little you stand still, how fast you always rush, how little time you give to the small things, to rhythmic repetition, to meditation, to the process rather than the end. She knows better. This woman understands it, this old lady with the blue eyes. She's learned that life lives in the details, that time isn't money, but something far more valuable. She's learned that knitting is a form of love. The train slows, brakes for a stop. She gathers her needles together in a calm, fluid motion, a movement she's made thousands of times, second nature now. She folds her work carefully, treats it like something sacred, as though it were the finest silk instead of mere wool. Now, if you look closely, you see it might become a scarf, or part of something larger, a piece of a whole she's weaving through her life. The stitches are perfect, even, flawless. This is a master's craft, someone who's given their whole life to this one thing. She looks at you again, directly into your eyes, and this time, the gaze is longer, meaningful. Your eyes widen, and for a moment, you wonder if you've actually been sleeping, had a real dream, or if you were conscious all along, awake through it all. The line has blurred, gone hazy, undefined. She nods again, slowly, an affirming nod, as though she's saying, "It's all right, you may sleep." This is the gift. This is the kind of silence we share. This is more than enough. This is everything. The train pulls in. A station passes. Husum hasn't come yet, perhaps, but the moment is here. She stands, slowly, with the patience of a woman who's been patient all her life. She takes her bag, her coat, her needles. You watch her go, and part of you wishes she could stay a little longer. But she goes, and you remain in your seat, left behind almost, but not hurt. The silence she leaves isn't empty or hollow. It's filled with the echo of her movements, with the memory of all the stitches she's counted, all the thoughts she's knitted in, perhaps all the prayers, all the wishes and hopes woven into that pale blue wool, like threads into a pattern. You see her face still, clear and vivid, that gentle, mild expression, those lines that tell the story of years and years of patience, a whole lifetime written in wrinkles on her skin. You lean your head back against the window and close your eyes, carefully, hopefully. The song of the needles still rings in your ears, a melody you now know you'll never forget, that will travel with you into dreams and beyond, through the rest of this journey, and perhaps forever. The train rolls on. You're sleeping now, truly sleeping, and that's good. You dream of wool and patterns, of hands at work, of a woman who understands that silence is more than just the absence of words. It is a cloth that wraps around you. There he sits, diagonally across from you, in the corner by the window. A tall man with thinning hair and a fine magnifying glass hung round his neck. A small travel chessboard lies before him on the table, and he's absorbed in it completely, as though the whole world exists in those squares. You boarded at Nuremberg, and he hasn't looked up since. The board is wood, a beautiful thing. The squares in dark cherry and light maple, the edges worn smooth by years of use. The pieces are substantial, not cheap plastic, but something denser, perhaps ebony and ivory, or something that looks like ivory. Each piece weighted, with presence, with history. He's already set up the figures in a position that matches no opening you recognize. This isn't standard, not a gambit or the Italian game or anything you'd find in a textbook. It's a puzzle, a position only this man understands, a question only he knows the answer to. You watch as he grasps a black piece, slowly, deliberately, as though in that very movement he's considering something. His finger rests on the piece for a long time before he sets it down. It's a pawn. He advances it 2 squares. Then he leans back and examines the board from every angle. There's no rush to this. It takes time. The journey from Nuremberg to Regensburg isn't long, but he doesn't seem to notice time passing at all. You wonder who he's playing against. There's no one opposite moving the white pieces, no one sitting there waiting for his next move. So he's playing against himself. Or no, not against, with. That's entirely different. This isn't a struggle where one must win and one must lose, where one is destroyed. It's a conversation, an internal dialogue between 2 parts of his mind, 2 different intelligences, 2 different viewpoints, 2 different selves in discussion about strategy and space, about time and possibility, about what might have been if this piece had moved differently. There's a beauty in that, a deep beauty you can only truly understand if you've done it yourself, if you've had that inner conversation too. Spring light comes through the windows, delicate light, not quite warm yet, but full of promise and the sense of green things coming. You see how this light falls on the pieces, casts small shadows, transforms the board into a 3-dimensionality that isn't quite real, but looks true. The white squares are yellow in this light, almost golden, and the dark ones are nearly black, like deep wells. The chessboard seems to begin moving, to come alive under the sunlight. He makes a quick move with the white pieces. A knight leaps across 4 squares into an aggressive position. At once, he shakes his head slightly, as if to say, "No, that won't do. That's too bold. It won't work." He sets the knight gently back on its original square and considers again. This deliberation takes a long time. Several minutes pass in complete silence. You realize you've been watching the whole time without his noticing. That's all right. It isn't rude, not an intrusion. It's honest attention, respect for another person going about their task, playing their game. You see the concentration in his face, pure concentration, the furrows deepening and darkening when he sees a problem, a difficulty, a flaw in his logic. He's perhaps 10 or 15 years older than you, a man in his middle years or early later years, someone who's learned how to be alone, to think alone, to be with his own mind. There's a beauty in that, a kind of stillness you've been missing in your own life, a peace you haven't found in a long while. You look at him and recognize yourself, the person you wanted to be, the person who draws you. A conductor passes, interrupting your watch. A woman with a trolley. The man with the chessboard looks up briefly, registers the movement, then turns his gaze away again. The game is more important than the world, more important than the train, more important than anything else. It's a dedication you understand, a commitment you respect without envy. He moves a white piece, a bishop. A good move, perhaps. Immediately, he reaches for a black piece and responds. This time, he doesn't hesitate long. The black response is swift, almost aggressive. It seems the black player is growing impatient, that this part of his mind is faster than the other. The landscape slides past. Small villages, forests just beginning to green. You see it all blurred because your attention is still with the man and his board. It's like a film playing just for you, a showing that won't happen again. His hands are old, but his fingers are still and sure. There are age spots on the back of his hand, and his knuckles are somewhat knotted. But when he moves a piece, it's with great grace, with slowness and care. This is a man who's thought with his hands his whole life. You wonder if he plays every day, if the chessboard is his constant companion, or if he brought it just for this journey. It looks too well loved, too much used to be anything new. This is an old friend. He sighs softly, barely audible. It's not a sigh of frustration or despair, but rather of deeper concentration, as though he's breathing through a difficult thought, as though breathing itself is part of the thinking. The black pieces have reached a good position, a secure one, and the white pieces are perhaps in a bit of danger, a touch exposed. He leans forward and studies the board even more intently, as though hunting for a secret only he can see. His eye moves from square to square, from piece to piece, like a man studying a painting that fascinates him. You lean back and realize you've been holding your breath all this time. You breathe out slowly and try to relax. But the game still draws you. It's like a magnet, a small world entirely unto itself. The minutes pass. 1 minute, 2, 5. He makes a move, then another, both thoughtful, both careful. The game develops slowly, grows more complex, becomes something only a mathematician could fully understand. You see how the board gradually empties, how the pieces exchange, how the endgame slowly approaches. This is no quick adventure. This is a marathon, a long road he must walk each day until he knows enough, understands enough. He leans back and closes his eyes, only for a moment. A deep pause, a breath for the mind. He isn't tired, you can see that plainly, but he gives his intellect a moment to breathe, to let go, to reload. He meditates in his own way, through chess, through silence, through presence. Then he opens his eyes again, slowly, and looks at the board, at the positions, at the possibilities. And in that moment, you understand. This is everything. This is the whole story here. A man, a chessboard, a train to Regensburg, a journey from Nuremberg to the final station, and a silence deeper than any words, more profound than language itself. This is communication without sound. This is reality in its purest form. The train slows, brakes, approaches Regensburg, the next station, the next destination. He makes one final move, very slowly, very deliberately, as though this single move decides everything, as though this gesture defines the whole game. Then he takes the chessboard with great care and packs it away gently, protects it like a child. You close your eyes and dream of black and white squares, of pieces dancing like people, of a language that is only movement, that needs no words, that says everything without speaking. There she sits diagonally across from you, a woman of middle years with brown hair falling in loose waves framing her face like water. Her book is large and heavy, a paperback with dog-eared corners and a cracked spine, worn from many hands, many lives it's touched and moved. The pages are yellowed with time and sunlight. She reads without noticing you, without acknowledging the world around her. The world outside the book no longer exists. Reality is suspended. There's only the pages, the words, the black ink on white, the story unfolding in her mind like a flower opening to the sun. You board at Karlsruhe, and the sun pours warm and golden through the windows. It's summer, truly, pressing warm outside, but inside the train there's a pleasant coolness, a kind of air-conditioned peace, a relief after the heat. She doesn't look up as you pass, not from rudeness, but from pure concentration. Her gaze is completely held by the pages, by the words some writer set down long ago, perhaps years back, and which now speak to her like an old friend. You try not to stare too much, but it's difficult. It's almost impossible not to watch. There's something about people who read that's absolutely captivating, that draws you like a magnet. They're both present and distant at once, here and somewhere else simultaneously. Her body sits in the train, certainly, but her mind is elsewhere, in another world, a world that exists only for her. You recognize yourself in it. You know that place, that dream, that escape from reality. There's a beauty in it you can't quite describe. Her face changes constantly as she reads. One moment she's neutral, concentrated, almost lost in herself. And then, without warning, the corner of her mouth rises. A smile. Not loud, not performed, not for public view, but real, genuine. A smile meant only for the pages. You wonder what she's just read. A love scene? A joke? Perfect dialogue? A small observation about the world that's true and painful and good all at once. The curiosity in you burns, but you say nothing. The page comes to an end. With an elegant gesture, she flips the corner, not forcefully, but with a gentle, well-practiced movement, like someone who's done this thousands of times. You realize she's probably done this millions of times in her life, that this book is an old friend, that she knows the rhythm and music of this movement perfectly. The book lies light in her hands, and she handles it with a kind of tenderness that's touching. It's no accident she's reading this book. It's a book that's loved, that's been read again, that travels through her life. Light falls on the new page, golden and warm, and you can almost see the individual words, can almost make out the letters, but only almost. They blur, not quite legible, not fully graspable. Blurred. And that's as it should be. This isn't your book, not your story, not your private thoughts and feelings. You're only a watcher, a silent observer of this reading, a spirit, a fleeting witness without judgment, without appraisal, without interruption. You have the privilege to see, but not to read. You have the fortune to observe, but not to know. Her face grows serious again, almost sad. Her brow furrows deeper and deeper. She reads something that troubles her, that makes her think, that perhaps frightens her. Or it's concentrated and demanding, textually and emotionally, requiring her full and absolute attention. You see her eyes move faster, see her reading more quickly, turning pages faster, as though the story's pace dictates hers. This is an important part of the book, you understand. This is a turning point, a moment where everything will change, where characters will lose their bearings, where truths will be revealed. She breathes deeper, and you understand that the book is actually moving her. There's a coffee on the table beside her. The smell reaches you, rich and warm. Coffee and something sweet, perhaps a pastry with raisins or almonds. But the reader doesn't touch her coffee. It sits there, grown cold by now, the steam long since vanished into the train's air, and she doesn't notice a thing. The book has all her attention, her whole soul perhaps. Everything else is secondary, peripheral. Everything else is just noise. You wonder how long she's been reading. The whole journey so far? Before you boarded? Will she read until Heidelberg? You don't want to know, because the mystery is more beautiful than any answer. She looks up briefly, not at you but out the window. Her eyes drift from the pages. It's a moment of pause, of rest. She needs a moment to breathe again, to come back from the book's world. Then she looks back at the page and she's gone, away, into another reality. The book has a bookmark. You see it, a red silk ribbon hanging between the pages. It's quite far into the book already. She's nearly at the end. You wonder if she'll be sad when the book finishes, or if she's already prepared to let it go. Her hands are slender and long. There's a wedding ring, simple, gold or something that looks like gold. Her nails are short and without polish. These are practical hands, hands that must do things, but also hands that want to read, that want to turn pages. She smiles again. This smile is larger than the first, more expressive, more vulnerable. You see, there's something beautiful and at the same time perhaps sad in the book, something that makes her happy and also touches her. It's good for you to see. It fills you with a kind of happiness that isn't your own. It's like watching a bird sing, completely alone, not knowing anyone listens. It's simply beautiful, perfect and true, without needing to know why, without requiring explanation. The shadows grow longer in the train, become more golden, grow softer. The light changes continuously, becomes golden, becomes orange, becomes something other than it was at the start. Time passes, hours slip by, or are they only minutes? She still reads, completely absorbed, completely dissolved in the book's world. The pages gather under her right hand, accumulating, read and finished, while with her left hand, she constantly reaches for new pages, opens new worlds. It's a dance, an old dance, and perfectly practiced. A dance she's danced her whole life, every day, in every quiet moment. You close your eyes for a moment, but you don't stop seeing her. You still see her clearly in your mind's eye. The woman with her book, lost in a story, physically present in the train, but absent in another world. A world more meaningful than this one. That's the real beauty of train journeys, you understand now. That you can watch other people without being seen. That you can glimpse their private worlds without interrupting them, without harming them. You're a spirit, a watcher, a silent witness to their happiness. The train approaches Heidelberg, slowly, deliberately. You open your eyes and see she's still reading, unmoved, as though the outside world doesn't exist. She won't finish when the train stops. The book will continue, and she will continue. Will step out and simply keep reading, somewhere else, perhaps on a bench, under a tree, in a garden, at home with a cup of tea. You wish her a good journey through the pages, through the words, through the story that only she knows, that's only her story, that no one else will read quite this way. That's enough. That's truly enough. That's all one needs to be happy, to be whole, in this moment or the next, on this train or wherever she goes.